Have you ever watched The Truman Show? It's a movie about a person who was raised in this fake world from the time that they were a baby. It was like a corporate sponsored baby that had no rights, and they just filmed that. They had cameras everywhere, and they just filmed everything about this person's life, and everybody knew that it was a TV show except Truman. And that's a really, really, really good example of the way that the world works. When I look at things like that, I think, did the person making this movie know this? Is this a sociopathic way to sort of, call out to all their friends, look guys, I'm actually saying it in a movie and these morons don't get it? Or is it somehow a premonition that people have? Like they're having dreams, like this is a really good idea, like, God is up there saying, okay, we need to start waking these people up from this, or whatever, okay? Or is it, like I said, because sociopaths love to put it in your face. It makes them, they have to constantly prove that they're better than you. Because they're not better than you, but and them being better than you is all in their head. So in order for it to stay there, they have to constantly prove it. So sociopaths would do, and you see a lot of this from politicians. They're just basically putting it on in your face going, what are you going to do about it? And social media does it too. Google does it. YouTube does it. With their terms and conditions, they're just like, what are you going to do? They actually say it. Where are you going to go? Oh, you don't like that we made these rules? Where are you going to go? It's like that. And if you're not a sociopath, you would never do anything like that. But sociopaths sort of have to. It's part of who they are. Okay? So, the reason that you're not filthy rich, if you want to be rich, because not everybody wants to be rich, okay? But if you're struggling with money, nobody wants to struggle with money, okay? Or if you're not rich and you want to be rich, then it's because you live in a false reality like Truman. And you can go all the way back and as far back in recorded history and see that this system has always been in place. Okay? There's always been slaves. It's in Scripture. It's in Scripture that there were slaves. And today, and then we kind of went with this whole weird thing where it was like, okay, if you had a war, then you could, like Moses was a slave. Let's use that as an example. Moses was a slave. And then he got picked up by these rich pharaohs and stuff like that. And then he then he killed somebody. And then he escaped. And then he sold himself into slavery. And you're like, wait a minute, I don't remember that story. Well, he actually did. He sold himself into slavery because he said to he had nothing, and he helped these two girls water their sheep, and so the father of the girls said, well, if you work for me for 10 years, I'll let you marry one of my daughters. And so it was like he was purchasing one of the daughters, but he had no money, so he used himself as, it's like a loan, like credit, I guess is the best way to put credit slavery, okay? And that's the way that it was. So back in the olden days, having lots of kids meant wealth because you could, if you wanted to buy something you couldn't afford, you could just sell one of them into slavery. And they would do it. They wouldn't be like, oh my God, I'm a slave. They just like, you don't go, oh my God, I'm a slave today. Oh, that's horrible, I'm a slave. They didn't do it then, just like you don't do it now, but you are a slave. Okay. The interesting thing today is that people don't even get anything first. They just go right into the slavery without getting anything. In fact, they actually pay to be slaves. Student loans are a perfect example of that. So you go out and you give somebody money to give you something that's worthless, because a degree is worthless, but it's like you're buying something that someone else says, if you buy that, then I'll give you a job. Okay? That's the only value that it has. If you go here and you give these people money, then I'll give you a job. That's what university is. That's what college is. Okay? Trade school is a little bit different. Okay? But if you're going to trade school, trust me, you're never going to be rich. That's kind of, but again, you're paying to actually become a slave. And then once you've paid that money and they give you a job, you basically become their slave, but you're actually treated poorer than the slaves in the past. Because the slaves in the past, they fed and sheltered, and they actually had pretty good lives. If you were fortunate enough to be a slave for a wealthy person, you had a much better life than you did out in the regular world. You know what I mean? Back on Daddy's farm, here you're living and being someone's handmaiden in a mansion. And just as an example. So if you're working today, you are a slave. Now, the elites have a big incentive to keep you poor. And they are above your governments. Meaning they're the ones that the ones that make the rules. They're the ones that tell the governments what they can and cannot do. Democracy is a joke. It doesn't exist. But if you understood that, then you'd be less likely to follow the rules. Okay? So, people are like sheep. They really are. People are like herd animals. They'll go and do what they see others do. They won't think, well, should I do that? No, they won't. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you had a bunch of sheep which are being raised for slaughter, because that's what all sheep are being raised for the most part. If they're male, they're definitely going to be slaughtered. If you're being raised for that, that's, only good for the farmer. It isn't good for the sheep. And then you just kind of have them out in this field, and a sheep comes along and sees a free sheep. Just a random sheep that has no owner. It's free. However it got there, it doesn't matter. But it's a free sheep. It will literally go and be with those sheep. That's the way people are. And so, and these elites look at us that way. That's the way they look at us. And they just constantly are developing systems in which to control us. And they've controlled us back to ancient civilization. There's always been, they talk about income inequality. It's always been that way. It's always been that way because we will worship them. So, rule number one, if you want to be rich, if you want to be wealthy, you need to stop worshiping people who have money. Rule number two, you have to stop showing you have money. Meaning, if you're buying a Mercedes just so you can show that you got money, or you're buying the latest phone so you can show that you have money, if you have that in your mentality, you're never going to be rich. You're never going to be rich. Rich people, these elite people, spend such a small portion of the money that they have, where poor people spend all of it and more. So, what you want is to be rich. That means you need to start acting like they do and doing the things that they do, or you can't get what they're what they have. You can't play by the poor rules and become rich. Okay? They're playing by different rules. They teach their children different rules. They teach their children different things. And then if you're relying on the government, then the government schools and all that other stuff, then your children are being taught to be slaves and work for them. I watched this clip and it was like showing all these different commencement speeches for the deans of the presidents or deans or whatever from these different universities, and they were all saying the same thing. You will now be able to go out and get a job, and you will, and be workers. And I was just like going, oh my God, how come I've never noticed this before? You know, basically he could just replace, you are now a slave of value, you know. It is, you know, you'll be able to become a slave much easier than others. You will be able to get the good slave jobs. It is what is happening. So the reality is they don't teach their children what we teach our children and what is taught to our children whether we want to or not. And they keep wanting our children younger and younger and younger. First it was just like school 1 through 12, and then it was like, oh no, we got to get them younger. Let's throw some kindergarten in there. And then it was like, oh, that's not work. We need to get them even younger. Let's throw some pre-kindergarten in there, preschool in there. And now they've got an even younger one than that. The next thing you know, they're just going to start taking them right out of the womb. Okay, it's like pre-kindergarten. You know? But it's all about, and they spend a lot of time in school to learn nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like there's literally nothing that you learned from those first 12 years in school that you're using in your life. Maybe writing, but most people don't even like. There's probably very little people in the world who you could take, like, say, okay, write a paper, just right here, write a paper and turn it in and get anything higher than an F. Because you didn't learn any of that stuff. Okay? But that's not the purpose of it. Well, you compare that to like private schools, and it's totally, totally different. Just look at workplaces where they need the people to be creative. Look at how Google and Facebook is. That's not a new way. That's more elite slaves. And they look at Amazon has non-elite slaves. At Amazon, you need to pee in bottles. At Google, you have sleep pods. When you get tired, you just go over there and you get into that $10,000 sleep pod and you take a nap. And you go over there and you get when you wake up, there's all kinds of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and all the little things that you want. Okay? Why? Because they need those dumb slaves to give them their ideas. They're like little brain slaves. You know what I mean? Here, pump out the ideas so we can get rich off of them. And we'll treat you better than the regular slaves. So, if you want to get rich, you have to absolutely stop thinking like that. You've got to stop following those rules. It's like the Truman Show. You need to sail across the river, open the door, and frickin' leave. And go into the real world instead of this one that's been created for you. Because it's getting a lot worse. It's getting a lot worse. But I hope to, with this series, show you the difference. Show you that what you're doing is never going to work. And the system's designed that way. The system is designed that way. It's designed to make you fail when you try. It's designed the whole thing is designed that way. Just look at what Elon Musk is doing to cryptocurrency right now. Anyways, I will see you in the next video.